Dr. Elena Park didn't believe in messages from beyond. She believed in signals, things you could graph, repeat, and publish. So when the unfamiliar pattern appeared in the hospital's sleep lab monitors at 3:17 a.m., she didn't gasp or pray. She leaned closer to the data, a clean, synchronized flare across two channels that should never align. The heart's variability and the brain's theta band, breathing, attention, memory, suddenly moving like dancers who'd rehearsed together in secret. 4 peaks, then a pause, then 4 more but inverted. The system auto-labeled it. Anomalous. On her screen, a note field populated, pulling from the patient file, not text from the machine. A line someone had typed days earlier, scheduled to appear at this exact time. If you're reading this, you're on the threshold. At 3:17, you'll think it's noise. It isn't, it's a choice. Elena checked the source. The note had been locked by a hospice patient on the oncology floor. Name: Gabriel Alvarez. 78, former math teacher. Status: comfort care, DNR. No access to the sleep lab system. And yet, here was his message arriving on the minute, inside her data stream. She stared at the heart-brain alignment still pulsing like a soft beacon. Noise, she wanted to say. Artifact, a bad lead. But then a whisper of a thought. Not a belief, just a hypothesis, and rose in her chest. What if this is intentional? To understand how a scientist who had built a career on skepticism found herself listening for a pattern she couldn't name. We have to go back 3 weeks, to the day a custodian knocked on her office door carrying a box of notebooks tied with twine. He stood in the doorway, cap in hand. "Dr. Park?" He asked me to bring these to you. The man's name was Mateo, my night shift. He kept the labs shining when the rest of the world slept. He set the box on her desk gently, like something alive. "Who asked?" Elena said. "Mr. Alvarez, room 7B. He said you would understand. Or at least, you'd try." Mateo's smile was apologetic, like he knew how odd this sounded. Elena untied the twine. Inside were dozens of small spiral notebooks, each labeled with a date and one phrase: intervals and mercy. She flipped a random one open. Graph paper, hand-drawn plots, notes in tidy block letters. HRV coupling spikes at decision points. The soul seems to lean forward first. Elena frowned. "The soul?" Mateo shrugged. "He taught high school math and choir at church. Says numbers sing if you listen long enough." "I'm a data scientist, Mateo. I listen to sensors." "Maybe that's what he means," Mateo said. "Just more of them." After he left, Elena skimmed the notebooks, annoyed at herself for even doing that, but her eyes kept stopping on the same strange convergence. Heart rhythms and brain waves lining up at moments he called TUR to turnings. Choices, confessions, reconciliations. He had logged memories next to the plots, places where someone forgave him, where he kept quiet and should have spoken, where a student returned years later to thank him for seeing more in her than she saw in herself. On the last page of one notebook, a line circled twice. If attention is where the mind rests and intention is where the heart leans, then the soul is the alignment of both, briefly visible in the numbers. Elena closed the cover. Beautiful nonsense, she told herself, but she slid the box under her desk instead of the trash. 2 days later, she met Gabriel Alvarez. He was thin, with scholar's hands and a smile that arrived before his words. "Dr. Park, thank you for seeing me." "I didn't promise to believe you," she said. "I promised to look." "That's all belief is at the beginning," he answered. "A willingness to look," he told her about an event 3 years ago, a cardiac arrest that lasted 8 minutes. He remembered being somewhere. He couldn't call it a place where time didn't feel like a line, but a room full of doors. After he recovered, he began noticing that certain moments in life, the ones that asked the most of him, came with a sensation he could feel and sometimes measure. So he measured. He wore an old athlete's chest strap to track heart rhythms and a cheap EEG headband. While he graded papers, he taught, and he watched, and he wrote. In the hospital, they laughed when I asked for a room near the sleep lab, he said, smiling like it didn't hurt him. Then Matteo told me you were, how did he put it? Allergic to nonsense but kind about it. I thought that sounded hopeful. Elena started to explain that heart rate variability and theta oscillations can correlate around respiration, that nothing here was supernatural. He nodded. Yes, and still, when people choose love over pride, the pattern is different. Love and pride are not scientific variables. They are if you can predict when they will appear, he said, and handed her a folded paper, today's date, a time, and a short message. At 3:17 a.m., the monitors in room 2 will show the coupling we discussed. We'll call it noise, and please, don't. She didn't explain that predictions don't count when you plant them in your own timeline and wait. She just said she would check. That night, Elena stayed late, told herself it was to catch up on reports. At 3:17 a.m., the signal arrived. 4 peaks, a pause, 4 more, inverted, and the scheduled message, a choice. She ran 3 diagnostics clean. She switched sensors. The pattern repeated like it could see her doubt and answer it one more time. In the morning, she found Gabriel asleep and left a note of her own on his tray. I saw something. I don't know what it is yet. EP. When she turned, Matteo was in the doorway, quietly pleased. Sometimes the mop hears the music before the microphone, he said. Over the next week, Elena did what she knew best. She tested. She asked volunteers to make small choices under observation, to forgive a debt under $20 or keep it, to text someone they were avoiding or not. She recorded their heart rhythms and brain waves, not every time, but often enough to matter. The equation appeared, a brief, precise alignment. Like a lock clicking open where 2 tumblers finally meet, Elena began sketching a model on her whiteboard. Attention, X, intention. Alignment. Not math in the strict sense, but a metaphor she could map to signals. She nicknamed it, quietly, to herself. The equation of the soul. She didn't use the word soul out loud, not in a hospital where grants paid for clean words like neurocardiac integration. But the hypothesis caught light in her chest. Maybe the most human things we do leave footprints in the measurable world. Small, fragile, but real. 3 things happened in quick succession. First, Elena received an email from a journal editor she respected. Sparse subject line, warm body text. He'd heard through colleagues about her preliminary data. If she had a manuscript, he wanted to see it. Second, her department head, Dr. Lucas Hale, asked to drop by for a peek. Lucas had been her friend once. Briefly more than that in graduate school before ambition taught them both the cost of being first. He walked in with careful praise that sounded like a contract. This is bold. Elena, risky, but if it holds, it's historic. Let me help you shape it. We should control the release. Third, Gabriel's condition worsened. On a rainy Thursday, Matteo found Elena and said quietly, "He asked for you." She sat by Gabriel's bed, monitors gentle in the dim. "You were right," she told him softly, about the pattern. "It appears when people choose generously," he smiled. "Not right, useful." He reached to his nightstand, hands trembling, and passed her a sealed envelope. "If the numbers go quiet before we finish, please read this at the time written. Don't open early. Don't postpone, promise." "Why the theater?" she asked, trying to make him laugh. "Because timing is part of the message," he said. "Doorways are where you stand and decide." He slept. Elena held the envelope and didn't ask why it felt heavier than paper. The betrayal, when it came, was clean and sharp. A colleague texted her a link. Preprint. Neurocardiac synchrony at decision thresholds. Hale et al. Her data. Her graphs, her whiteboard model, renamed and flattened. Her name buried in acknowledgments with a typo. She didn't shout. She went to Lucas's office. He didn't act shocked. He acted inevitable. "Elena, I moved fast because we had to. You were sentimental about it. Using words like soul in drafts, bringing in a janitor as a source. It spooked people. I protected the work. Our work. It was never yours," she said, voice steady. "And you didn't protect it. You shaved off the parts that meant anything." "The parts that mean anything," he smiled thinly. are the parts the world will fund. She left before she said something small. In the elevator, she pressed her back against the wall and closed her eyes. It wasn't just rage. It was grief, for the way the world can strip wonder for speed. When the doors opened, Mateo was there like he'd been waiting for whatever the floor delivered. "Do I want to know?" he asked. "Not yet," she said, and something in her voice must have told him enough, because he fell into step beside her without questions. That night, Elena sat alone in the lab, the envelope Gabriel had given her on the table. She checked the time. AM, the minute from the first message. Is. One the system had called a good choice, she broke the seal, a single page. Gabriel's handwriting. "Dear Dr. Park, if the pattern is true, this will find you in the hour you're most tempted to make the numbers into a weapon. Against a colleague, against the system, against yourself." A single page. Gabriel's handwriting. "Dear Dr. Park, if the pattern is true, this will find you in the hour you're most tempted to make the numbers into a weapon. Against a colleague, against the system, against yourself. I'm asking you to choose a different equation. There are 4 variables in every turning. Attention. What you're willing to. Notice. Intention. What you truly want. Compassion. Who you include in the wanting. Choice. The act that writes. The next line, align the first 3, and the 4th will be wise. If you can, forgive quickly and hold boundaries firmly. That is harder than vengeance and softer than surrender. If I am gone when you read this, know that the numbers were never the point. They were an arrow. The point is where they point. Gabriel. She didn't realize she was crying until a tear smudged the ink. Forgive quickly. Hold boundaries firmly. How do you do both? Elena drafted 2 emails. The first to the journal editor, attaching her full data set, time-stamped logs, and the original hypothesis with the messy words intact. She included a note explaining the context and naming everyone who had contributed. Yes, including Lucas, but also Mateo, and with permission from his family, Gabriel. The second to the hospital's ethics board, documenting the unauthorized use of protected data. Before she hit send, she added a third. A short text to Lucas. I'm reporting what you did. I won't smear you. I will tell the truth. His reply came fast. You'll burn your career, she typed back. Then let it be light. She pressed send the next morning. She went to room 7B. It was empty. A freshly made bed, a chair turned toward the window. Mateo found her in the hallway, hands folded, eyes wet but kind. He asked me to tell you that your math sings, he said, and that door's open when you listen. 2 weeks, the hospital felt like a courtroom. Meetings, statements, quiet, hallways where people chose sides with their eyes. Lucas argued that he'd protected her from her own naivete. He said the word bisolar like it was a crime. Elena kept her voice even. She showed her logs, her drafts, Gabriel's notebooks with dates and signatures. She didn't read the letter out loud. It felt like prayer. Not fragile, just private. Here is what truth did slowly. It didn't humiliate. It clarified. The board concluded that Lucas had violated authorship and data policies. His preprint was withdrawn. He was suspended pending review. There was no public shaming, just a record and a door closing with a quiet latch. On the same day, the journal editor wrote back. He'd read her manuscript, the one with the messy words. He didn't promise acceptance. He promised understanding. If this holds, it opens a field, he wrote. If it doesn't, it's still the most honest attempt I've seen to measure what matters. That evening, Elena walked to the chapel on the first floor, not because she knew what to say there, but because she didn't. The room was simple, wooden pews, a stained glass window of blues that looked like ocean. She sat, and for the first time since the betrayal, she let stillness do some of the work. Mateo slipped in and sat a few rows behind, like a bodyguard who knows when to be a shadow. After a while, he said quietly, "You forgave him, didn't you?" "I'm trying," she answered. "Trying is what forgiveness looks like the day before it's true," he said. In the months that followed, Elena's work changed shape. She didn't go on talk shows or start a religion. She built protocols, careful, replicable, humble, to see when the equation appeared and when it didn't. She learned its limits. It wasn't a crystal ball. It didn't predict lottery numbers or tell you which road to take. It showed up most when choices asked for courage dressed as kindness, when people told the truth kindly, refused cruelty without becoming cruel, and returned calls they'd been avoiding for years. She started a weekly volunteer study in the hospice wing, not with wires at first, with chairs, 2 at a time, one for a patient, one for a person they needed to speak to. She listened as the conversations unlocked something that registered on monitors later. She watched numbers move when hearts did. On a quiet afternoon, a young nurse poked her head into the small room they used for those meetings. "Dr. Park, there's a family asking for you. They said it's about a teacher. Mr. Alvarez." Elena walked in and met a middle-aged woman with Gabriel's eyes. "This is my father's classroom," the woman said, gesturing gently at the circle of chairs. "He would be delighted." She handed Elena a small box, the same twine as before. Inside were 3 things: a metronome, a tiny tuning fork, and a note for experiments that remember to sing. Elena smiled and cried at the same time. When she looked up, the clock on the wall was at 3. She laughed out loud, not at the coincidence but at the kindness of it. Not long after, she was invited to give a small talk in the auditorium where, years earlier, a visiting professor had mocked her first poster for being poetic. Same stage, same scuffed floor, different Elena. She didn't open with equations. She opened with a story about a math teacher who measured his life in intervals and mercy. She described the alignment, that brief, measurable echo when attention, intention, and compassion line up just enough for choice to sing on key. She didn't use the word soul until the end. "The equation of the soul," she said. Letting the phrase land without apology isn't a rule. It's a reminder that what we do to each other shows up somewhere. Sometimes even in the numbers. The data won't save us, but it can point to the door we still have to walk through. People didn't clap right away. They sat in a soft quiet, the kind that follows truth. Then the applause grew, not loud. Exactly. Warm, like gratitude discovering its voice. When the hall emptied, Elena found Matteo in the back row. Pretending not to wipe his eyes with his sleeve, she sat beside him. "Did I go too far?" she asked. "Not far enough," he said. "There's a whole city that needs this." He wasn't wrong. The study grew, slowly, ethically, stubbornly. Applications appeared that Elena hadn't predicted, and she was glad she hadn't. A mediation program for families in grief. A training for residents on how to deliver bad news with human eyes. A protocol for end-of-life decisions that began with a question no chart contains. Who do you want to be when you make this call? Sometimes the equation didn't appear when they expected. It that humbled them. Sometimes it showed up when a patient asked a nurse about her day. That humbled them. More. Elena wrote a sentence on the whiteboard and left it there like a lighthouse. If we can measure the moment a person chooses love over fear, not to judge it but to honor it, maybe science and spirit weren't strangers. Maybe they were neighbors who forgot how to say hello. One evening, months later, Elena opened her email and saw a name she hadn't expected. Lucas. No excuses. No theater, just a line that matched the room where forgiveness stands. "I'm sorry. I was afraid of being second. I became someone I don't respect. Thank you for telling the truth without trying to kill me. If you're willing, I'd like to help, quietly, under your lead." She read it twice. Forgiveness is not forgetting. Boundaries are not punishment. She typed, "You can help. The first condition is simple. We tell the truth. Always. The second, credit flows toward the patient first. The third, when the work sings, we remember who taught us the melody." He wrote back one word, "Deal." Later that night, Elena walked past the chapel and heard the faint ping of a tuning fork. Matteo was inside, grinning as if caught with contraband joy. He struck it again and watched the metronome on the front pew begin to tick, pulled by almost nothing. He pointed at it and whispered, "Neighbors." Elena laughed. "Say hello. Here is what this story is really about. Not prophecy that overrides your life, but attention that returns you to it. Not miracles that force belief, but moments that invite courage. Not perfect data, but honest data in a world that needs honesty like oxygen. The equation of the soul won't tell you who to be. It will show you when you are being who you meant to be, even for a breath, and ask if you want more of that. So now it's you in the next turning. Maybe it's a phone call you've avoided. Boundary you need to set without hate. A thank you meant to send last year. A truth you can say kindly. A forgiveness that begins as trying and ends as true. At the doorway, the numbers won't decide, you will. But if you listen to your attention, your intention, your compassion, you might feel a tiny alignment, like a hand on the right shoulder at the right time. You might see 4 peaks and a pause, not on a monitor, but inside your chest. You might hear a song that doesn't ask for applause, only for company. Dr. Elena Park remained a scientist. She asked better questions. She made fewer speeches and more chairs. When people asked if she believed in the soul, she smiled and said, "I believe in alignment." The names are less important than the door they open. At 3:17 on the afternoon, the first paper was accepted. Not for its certainty, but for its honesty. She walked to the window of the lab and felt the city breathing. She touched the small tuning fork on her desk and watched the metronome lean toward it. Neighbors, hello. The equation didn't save anyone. People did, but sometimes when they chose well, the numbers sang, and that was enough light to take the next step, which, for any of us, is all a future ever really asks.